Well, good morning, folks. Thanks for joining us for the Tech Summit. My name is Ryan McGee, and I'm sure everybody else is just tied up in the keynote right now, so they'll all probably crowd you in a second here. I run the security product marketing team back in Redmond, and you're welcome. I brought the weather with me. So you got to warm up from 32 or something this morning to something a little bit more pleasant in the 40s this afternoon, I hope. That's exactly what we lived through all winter long in Redmond, and so I feel right at home. I'm going to walk you through a lot of demos today, actually, in terms of how we can help you manage and protect your digital transformation. And we'll give you some insight into how we're building new technology into Microsoft products to help you do that, and give you some insight into sort of a framework in which you can think about how to improve your posture there. So I just want to start with that concept, though, digital transformation. Those are the words we use. They may not be exactly the way you think about it, but as you look at the way that your organization is adopting technology, I think you'll find some similarities to what we're seeing in a lot of organizations around the world, which is the increased adoption of Internet of Things, mobile, cloud technologies, in an effort to move the business forward, in an effort to be more competitive, in an effort to change the way that your organization gets things done, whether that's from a business point of view or from a process point of view. This concept of continually evolving IT, and now we're in this realm of really rapid evolution or transformation, is something that we're seeing is quite common for people. And so this is an opportunity not only to make workers in the organization and employees more productive, but it's also an opportunity for IT to change its role in the organization. And so we're seeing a lot of organizations saying IT is no longer just the folks who keep the lights on and make sure that the information flows, but in fact, IT can deliver change to our business. IT can make the business better by bringing us new technologies and by helping us implement those technologies. And so if that's something that sounds familiar, then you're doing what we call digital transformation, even if you don't think of it that way. It's a big opportunity. It's a huge thing. It's probably the number one top-of-mind goal that we hear from CIOs when we talk to them about our technologies. But it's also a huge security problem, frankly, because as you bring in new technologies and as you become more mobile and more cloud-based, you open up new vectors of attack. Simultaneously, you could think of the attackers as undergoing a digital transformation of their own. They're realizing that IT assets and information assets really are core to every business around the world. And so as they look for ways to profit from digital cybercrime, they're looking for ways to use digital transformation themselves to attack you. And so just to sort of refresh your memory of some of the glory days of 2016, here are some of the greatest hits from last year. We had an iOS issue where just receiving a text message could brick your phone. You could be completely compromised just to get this message. We had issues where the Russians were hacking Olympic athletes. You thought I was going to talk about somebody else, didn't you? And we had issues where Colin Powell's emails were leaking. You thought I was going to talk about somebody else, didn't you? And we also had, of course, all the compromised users in the Yahoo universe. We got two big hits of that last year as Yahoo struggles to kind of keep its long tenured user base up to snuff in terms of password security. So these, of course, are just a few of the things that we saw. We saw lots of others. You probably felt lots of others personally, either in your own personal life as you struggled to keep up with new passwords on Yahoo sites, or in your professional life as you understood what is really going on in terms of attackers against your organization. And so we think of that as kind of the environment we live in, and this is the context in which we try to invest. Therefore, for most organizations we talk to, cybersecurity is, again, the number one priority. I've been in the industry about 20 years now, and I've seen this ebb and flow a little bit. This is definitely a flow period where cybersecurity is a top-of-mind thing for almost every organization I speak with. And it's in particular because they're thinking about how do I do cloud and mobile? And as I do that, I'm opening up all sorts of new vectors for attack. So if I have all of my users using mobile devices to access corporate information, if I have a number of data centers, maybe some of them are owned by me, others are owned by other companies, so I'm using public cloud data center technologies or some mix of my own and public cloud data centers. That's an issue that I need to understand. How does it affect my cybersecurity policy? In the realm of cloud, we also think of SaaS applications. I bet if I asked every one of you right now how many SaaS applications are in use by your employees, you would underguess it by about a factor of 20. It's a huge wave of employee usage that we as IT people may not be entirely aware of. Like, you kind of know there's some SaaS usage going on. Some of it may be even sanctioned, some of it unsanctioned, but I guarantee you there's more than you think. And so we'll talk about how do we adapt to those worlds. And in order to do that, I actually want to talk about stones in northern England. This is a pile of stones arranged very neatly into what you might call a castle. This is Bamburgh Castle. And throughout the Middle Ages, Bamburgh Castle was widely regarded to be just purely impregnable. First of all, it's on this little island here, so it's got this great vantage point. Second, it has super huge, thick walls. Third, it has multiple layers of walls. And then during the War of the Roses, I have to look at my name, at the name here, the Earl of Warwick. I always forget the Earl of Warwick's name. The Earl of Warwick came along and he brought a cannon. Cannons weren't new at this point in history, but the technology that the Earl of Warwick's cannon possessed was new. It had better distance and it had better accuracy than any other cannon at the time. And so the Earl of Warwick is able to step way back here, fire 300-pound granite cannonballs into the castle, and eventually the castle fell. And so this sort of, it was a huge kind of wave of news across England and across Europe that the Bamburgh Castle, the historically known impregnable Bamburgh Castle, suddenly had fallen. And so now there was in this new era. Like, we were no longer in the era of hiding in stone boxes. We were in the era of, gosh, how do we mobilize armies now? And how do we defend ourselves? And how do we do things in this world where we can't always depend on hiding inside the castle with the king and all of his most important people and all of his assets? And so new professions sprang up, new specializations sprang up. It used to be that all you needed to do in order to be a warrior was be able to lift a shield and carry it for a long distance. And suddenly there were new technologies and new skills that were important to the world. And so the reason I want to give you all this history nonsense, I hope you didn't get too bored and have flashbacks of high school history class there for a minute. But the reason I wanted to point this out is because it's very similar to the world that we're in today in terms of cybersecurity technologies. We used to always think of our IT organizations or our IT sort of kingdom as being something that had a wall around it and had a perimeter, right? And you would put a firewall at the outside of your network and you'd say, okay, good, now I know that the bad guys are outside and the good guys are inside and things can flow freely inside and we're all good. But of course, in the world today, we're not living in a castle anymore. We're living in a world where everybody has been inspired, just like people were inspired when Bamburgh Castle fell, to be more mobile, to be more specialized, and to do things a little bit differently. So we need technologies that can adapt to that. One of the ways that Microsoft has been doing that is through what we call the Intelligent Security Graph. And the Intelligent Security Graph, you'll hear me talk about it a few times during this session. The Intelligent Security Graph is really something that we feel is now possible because of this no more castles sort of mentality that we have in the security world. It's something that is possible because we can bring expertise, resources, and time that no single organization has ever been able to bring to this problem before. The problem always has been, how do I understand who's about to attack me, and once they do attack me, what are they going to do, and how do I get all the data that I need in order to understand all that? And so we are able now, because of the surface area that we cover as Microsoft, because of the operating of the services that we do, because of the products that we serve you with, to bring expertise, resources, and time at a scale beyond what you could do as an individual organization or even any collection of organizations that we're aware of could do. And so the Intelligent Security Graph is one of these things that we think is very, very much a product of breaking out of the castle mentality when you come to security. So let me give you a little bit more about what feeds this graph. What are we talking about when we say the Intelligent Security Graph? Well, it is comprised of about 200 or more global cloud consumer and commercial services. So everything from our Outlook.com service for consumers to Office 365 and Azure and Dynamics 365, all of our cloud services. We have about 200 of those. They feed into the graph. We have about 1 billion Windows devices that we update every month. All of that information, for those of you that opt in to send error reports back to Microsoft, that all feeds into the graph. That's very important information that we can use to understand how cyber criminals are operating. Every month we process 300 billion authentications. This is through our Azure Active Directory service, and even if you don't think you're a user of Azure Active Directory, you probably are. Either if you're an Office 365 user, you're a user of Azure Active Directory. If you're an Xbox Live user, you're a user of Azure Active Directory. If you're a user of Outlook.com, you're an Azure Active Directory user. So we do about 300 billion authentications every month, and we can understand a great deal about what's going on in the world of identity from all of that. And so that all goes into the graph. And so there's just tremendous volume of data. That's just 3 samples of the types of things that we put in there. But there's a tremendous, tremendous volume. And we're operating all of these things at a scale that nobody else in the world is doing. So just pumping tons and tons of data into this thing. That's a part of it. I forgot email analyzing. We do 200 billion emails every month analyzing for spam and malware in Office 365. And all of that goes into the graph. So this volume, it just keeps going. I forgot about the 18 billion Bing web pages that we look at every month for malicious code and for phishing sites and things like that. We understand what those look like. And they all go into the graph. So volume is one big piece of it. The other part of it is variety. So the types of signals that we're able to feed into the graph are pretty broad in terms of variety. So not just user logins, but also denial of service attempts that we see going on in Azure, attacks that we see against virtual machines in Azure and against Windows PCs, spam, system updates, enterprise security information that we're able to process in Azure, all the device logins that I mentioned, et cetera, data encryption, all of this stuff, all this variety of signal that we have also lets us build this incredibly rich security intelligence graph. Now, what does that do for you, is your question, I'm sure. Well, it makes all the dots on the slide go together in a circle, is what it does. No, what it does for you is we actually feed all of that information back into our products. We spend about $1 billion in R&D on security every year. A lot of folks don't think of us as a security product vendor, and I think that's fair. But if you look at this number, you'll understand we're kind of up there, where this is about the same size as some of the biggest security vendors that you buy products from every day. It's probably bigger than many of the security vendors that you buy products from. So we're spending a great deal of investment on technologies that help with security, and a lot of it is about getting the goodness out of the Intelligent Security Graph and putting it into Office, putting it into Windows, putting it into Azure and EMS and OMS, all of these technologies that can benefit from the graph, because as we build that thing, as it goes and crunches all that massive volume of data and that massive variety of data, as it turns all of that into analytics and an understanding versus just a mountain of data, it can make all of those products smarter and better about how they protect. If we process 300 billion authentications every month, that means that our services, and I'm going to show you a couple of them in a minute here, can help you understand better when there's weird behavior going on in terms of the authentications in your organization. So we can bring together through those products, through Office and Azure and Windows, we can bring our global knowledge of what's going on in the world from those 300 billion authentications with your local knowledge, with what's actually happening to your users and in your organization on your devices. We can merge those two data sets and we can let those products do a better job of protecting the authentication of every single end user in your organization or every PC from malware or or. It goes on. So, the thing we have to keep in mind, though, before I get excited and try to, I almost went into demo mode. Whoa, easy there. We have to keep in mind that security has to be built in a way that is engineered to delight both the IT folks and the end users of the products. We have this great affinity in the security world for just locking things down, just really hardening everything. And of course, the most secure system in the world is the one that you unplug from the wall and shut down and put in a closet somewhere, right? But that makes it unusable. You got to be able to make things usable. And so you don't have, and it's not only just making it usable, making it possible to get stuff done, but also making it so that the end user loves to use it. Because if the end user doesn't love it, they're going to find ways around it. And that's how you end up with shadow IT, right? So some of the things that I'm going to show you today, I will hope to highlight for you ways that we've tried to make things that end users will love and that IT will also love, because it will define the paramount of security that you want it to. The way that I want to sort of test that, or the bar that I'm going to set, I think, is these questions. We hear these from all of our customers. I think they're some of the most common questions that we hear around security. Try to put it in real terms here. So, can you answer yes to these questions? Do you know who's accessing your data? You don't have to tell me if you know the answer to that question. I think I have an idea. We have very little ability to know that sometimes, I understand. Can you grant access to that data based on real risk, like in real time? Can you protect your data on your devices, in the cloud, and in transit? All three of those methods really are important. Can you quickly find and react to a breach? And most importantly, maybe, do your users love the protections you're putting in place, their work experience? So we think if you can answer yes to all of these questions, you're in pretty good shape. We also think, having talked to many of you over the course of many years, most of you are going to say no to some of these questions, and that's okay. Don't feel bad about it. But I'm going to hope that I can show you some technologies that will help you say yes to these questions. So we're going to do that in this framework because this is the tried and true best framework, I think, in terms of how you think about cybersecurity. Protect, detect, respond. How do you protect information and devices and assets the company thinks are valuable? How do you detect when something is going on, when there's an attack in progress? And then what do you do to respond? And of course, your response will color your protection. Your response will inform how you change your protection to get better against the next attack. So that's why it's a cycle. I'm going to show you each of those three things a little bit differently, and we'll set up a few products in each area. And so I'll try and repower all my devices and make sure that they're all going to be happy here. Let's look at Protect first. As we look at Protect, of course, you're going to think immediately about things like anti-malware protection on your endpoints and firewalls on your network and things like that. You're going to think about ways that you can prevent people from getting into your building physically, maybe. Those are all good things, and of course they are important ways to protect. But I'm actually going to suggest that what you're not doing enough in, or what you should be focused more on, is probably the better way to say that, is identity. I think that identity is the new control plane for protection because you need an identity of some sort in order to get to just about anything in your organization that you care about. You care most about information, about documents, about databases, about IP, intellectual property of some sort, right? You probably care less about the actual physical asset itself. That's a valuable thing too, but you care most about that information, that intellectual property. And so identity is the way that any attacker gets access to any of that. And so it really needs to become the way that you think about protection in many cases. It is, in fact, the root cause of 75% of intrusions, compromised credentials. So the first thing an attacker tries to do, this is why phishing is one of the most common types of attack these days. First thing an attacker wants to do is get the username and password of an individual in an organization. It doesn't have to be anybody important necessarily, just any individual. Because if I can get inside the organization, then I can use that username and password to traverse laterally and to escalate privileges and find my way towards valuable assets. And so even if the computer I land on as an attacker at first doesn't have anything super valuable on it, I can probably find my way to something that is pretty valuable. And so this is why we think that identity is kind of the control plane. So let's demo protect. I'm going to start over here on my iPad, I think, right after I reconnect it and make it happy. So let's look at protection in terms of email. Email is the bearer of so much information these days. Not only the things that we type in emails, of course, but all the attachments that are attached to email messages can be very, very valuable. There's a lot of valuable assets in there. But it's also something that's super critical to getting work done. And so you really want to provide all of your users the ability to get access to their corporate email from a device of some sort, their phone or their iPad or something. And it may or may not be one that you as the company own. But you want to make sure that you control that experience. So I'm going to show you how we can control the apps that are allowed to access email. So if I'm a user of this iPad and I say I want to use Mail, the native application, to get access to my email, I'm going to go ahead and log in with my credentials and say, okay, give me access to my Exchange email box. And as it adds that account, it's going to go and try and retrieve my messages from the server. But IT has put in place a policy that says, this is not the application we want you to use to access your corporate email. We want you to use something else. We're actually going to send you instead an email that says, this is not an OK application. The OK application is Outlook. You should go over here to get it. And so this is something you can do with our Enterprise Mobility and Security Suite, EMS. You can set that policy. Of course, we do support this inbox application. If you want to use it, go for it. But I'm just showing you here that you can choose which applications get access to email and which don't. And so now I can say, okay, great, I'm going to use Outlook instead. Luckily for you, you don't have to watch me set that up. I've already done that. But here's Outlook. 42 million plus users, 4.5 stars in the Outlook or in the app stores. Here is the world's most popular email application, even in Android and iOS device worlds. I have access to all of my email. I have this rich experience just like I do on my desktop. I can go into my calendar and see my meetings. I can join Skype meetings from here. And so I can really have the full experience, and this may be the experience that IT wants me to have. And so if you want to do that for your users, you can do that with this technology. You can ensure that people are accessing via applications that you believe are secure. Now let me show you one other thing that we can do. It's not just Outlook, the application, but it's also, what if I wanted to only allow certain browsers to have access to my emails? I can do that as well. This is the managed browser that comes with EMS, and I can install that on people's devices if I like and have that be the way that they get to email from the web. I can do that for a number of other applications as well. I could say SAP, I could say Adobe, I could say Citrix. These are applications I want to have access to things versus some other applications that should not have access. And so that's providing access to information based on the application that is being used to access the information. Now let me switch over here to Windows and show you some other things that we're doing. And we'll also look at, that's the wrong machine, we'll also look at how we administer this. Okay, so first of all, let me log in. Hands off. Log in with my face, that's Windows Hello. We demo it a lot, so you've probably seen it before. That's why I didn't hear the gasp that I would expect. Thank you. I feel so much better now. This is one of the technologies that is, the best of Windows devices, Microsoft devices with Windows 10. It allows you to give this wonderful end user experience. I got to tell you, we use this at Microsoft. I absolutely love it. And so I actually gasp every morning when I do it, just so that I can feel good about it. No, when I sit down at my desk, though, I just turn on my PC and I stare at it, and it unlocks. I don't have to type a password. This is great when I move from one meeting to another. I do that all day long. I'm just in and out of meetings. And so I shut my PC down, I go to the next meeting, I wake it up, it logs in, I'm not sitting there typing and fumbling and fingering my password and things. Fantastic end user experience, really, really secure as well. So let's look at, now that we've logged in, and I've made a big, big deal out of logging in, let's look at what this conditional access looks like if you do it based on user risk versus based on the application that they're using. So we said a minute ago you can only use Outlook. Now let's say your behavior is an indicator of what you should be able to access. So I'm going to open up two browsers here. This one on the right is the Tor client. Those of you who are bad guys know Tor browsers as one of your main tools. And those of you who fight bad guys for a living know Tor browser as something that you're a little bit afraid of, because what the Tor browser does is it allows you to mask your IP address. So you can't see on the other end when the server receives the request from that client, that server doesn't know exactly where that client came from. And so when I log in on the left-hand side on Edge in the Microsoft browser, which we will say that this IT policy has been set up to trust, I'm going to be able to just sign in just as I normally would, except for I have timed out of my session. There we go. I can sign in. I really can. And all I have to do is just click on the right thing. Another gasp. I love it. So I can sign in here. I get access to all my applications because this is a trusted browser. I seem to be doing normal stuff from a user behavior perspective. And I can get access to all sorts of my Office applications, but also to about 2,700 other SaaS applications with that single sign-in. We've done all the work to integrate with Salesforce and Twitter and 2,698 others, so that you don't have to do that work. You can give your users single sign-on access to things like Salesforce. It's single-ish. Single as long as you don't let it time out sign-on. How about that? Now let's look at what the experience is like over here in the Tor browser. Similar sort of starting place. And I'm going to go ahead and say sign in. And the Tor browser, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, we'll look in the onion here to see what the circuit is like. It's sending me through the United Kingdom and Romania out to the internet before it gets to its eventual destination. And so as I sign in here, Azure Active Directory in the background is going to say, this doesn't seem right to me. You're coming from Romania, we guess? So we're going to have to do a little bit more to make sure you're really you. So it's going to call me now because IT has set up a policy that says if somebody seems risky, ask for a second factor of authentication. And as it calls me out here, there we go.
Microsoft sign-in verification system. Please press the pound key to finish your verification.
Easy enough. I press pound.
Successfully verified. Goodbye.
And the system says, okay, you must be you even though you're coming from Romania. And so it's going to let me get access to that same set of applications. I'm going to have all my Office applications. I'll even be able to do single sign-in to Salesforce and those other 2,699 applications. Takes a little bit longer because I'm traversing half the world every time I send a request, but I can do it. And so this is signing in, or this is preventing access or challenging people based on their riskiness of their behavior. Now, let's look at the backside of this, the user or the administrator experience. So that was what the end user sees. This is how it looks to you as the administrator. You're looking at the Azure Active Directory Identity Protection control panel here in Azure. And what you're seeing is you have a bunch of risk events. You can see who's been or what types of risky behavior have been done in your organization. You see here that I have some people signing in from anonymous IP addresses. That's the Tor browser that I just showed you probably. Atypical locations, also maybe the Tor browser scenario. Unfamiliar locations, so this is like, hey, you've never signed in from there before. Those types of events, and I can drill down into all of those, of course. I can also look at it from a user point of view, and I can say, who are the riskiest users in my organization, and what do I want to do about it? We saw a policy just now where we saw that when I was risky, I was presenting a medium risk, and I was challenged for a second factor. I could set up a different policy and say, let's see, Garth seems like a pretty risky guy. Let me apply a policy based on users that are like Garth. And I would say, okay, we have Garth in that user. I could exclude people. I could include entire groups. And I might set conditions. And I might say, if the user risk is medium, I want to, if the user risk is medium, let's try that again. But this time we'll really save it. I'm going to block access. Now I could choose not to block access. I could choose, if you're a medium risk, just challenge for a second factor of authentication or something like that. Now I can even look at this and see how many users are going to be impacted if I set this thing up. Now I can keep my help desk from getting slammed if I put this policy into place. Looks like I would have 2 out of my 119 users be impacted if I put this into place. I might be comfortable with that, and so I might go ahead with this policy. But I might change it too if I said 2 is too many, or 100 is too many, or whatever it ends up being. So that's how you look at the policy side of things. Let me also tell you about some things we do in terms of highly privileged identities. So these are your administrators of your services, administrators of your servers in Azure, those sorts of things. When we look at highly privileged roles, we want to conform. I think many of you are hopefully thinking about how to do this. I know it's hard. But hopefully you're looking at just in time and just enough administration as a principle, as an operational principle. When someone needs access to a sensitive asset, when someone needs their identity to be highly privileged, you want it to be just enough privilege for them to do the work that they need to do, and you want it to be just for the amount of time that they need to get it done. So this control panel allows you to do those sorts of things. So I can say, look at here under the global administrators, I have Sarah Davis set up already to expire on Friday, on tomorrow, so that when she is done with her work, she's going to lose those privileges, and I don't have to worry about her having access that she doesn't need to have, so that if she does get attacked, if her identity does get compromised in some way, it's not going to lead that attacker to that really highly privileged asset. So that is the back end of doing conditional access based on user behavior. So those are a few of the things that you can do to help protect. Now we can answer the questions. Do you know who's accessing your data? Can you grant access to it based on risk in real time? And do your users love their work experience? So we're 2 out of 5 already. We still got 45 minutes to go. There's no way that I'm not going to get these all done. Let's talk about what we showed you there. So Azure Active Directory Identity Protection, that was the last thing you saw. That was the admin console that helped me do those things. Azure Active Directory Privileged Identity Management, that was actually the real last thing you saw. So those two things are the admin side of things. We saw Outlook and Android fully powered by the Microsoft Cloud. We saw that Windows Defender Application Guard and Enhanced per app conditional access helped me contain where the surface area is in terms of applications that can access my information. And we talked a little bit about the partner ecosystem that we're enabling to do single sign-on and all those sorts of wonderful things. So this is a great snapshot moment. These are the words that you want to go search on later. If any of those technologies or capabilities seemed interesting to you, now you'll be able to go back to the browser and just put in words like Azure Active Directory Identity Protection, and you'll get information about what you're trying to search on. 3, 2, 2, 1.5, 1. Some of you people need Windows phones because you could go from lock screen to photo in 5 seconds or less. So a couple companies that are already using these technologies. Unilever, impossibly large organization. I mean, we're talking about the brands that Unilever sells are used by over half of the world's population. They're just a massive, massive organization. 50% of the households in the world, 2 billion times a day. They wanted to embrace the cloud and enable their employees to work anytime, anywhere, securely, of course. And so they're rolling out Office 365 and EMS with about half of their users now protected with multi-factor authentication, like the phone call that I just showed you. And they're beginning their migration to Intune to manage devices. So they're going to be managing using Intune, which is part of our EMS suite, to do all of their device management. Bristow, the one on the right-hand side there, they transport workers to and from oil rigs, and they do other things in that service industry. So they work in this very highly regulated environment. They have a lot of restrictions on how they manage information because they're a highly regulated industry. And they wanted to control access and guarantee users accessing their services on premises were who they said they were. And so their SAP and their Workday services now are protected by multi-factor authentication using some of that same technology that I showed you in EMS. So it's not just about multi-factor and single sign-on for cloud services, it's also about multi-factor and single sign-on for some of your on-premises services as well. So that's protection. That's, of course, not all of the technology we can offer you in protection. There's a lot of stuff I could have showed you there. We tried to keep it a little bit restrained so that I didn't completely bore you. This would have been like a day-long session. Let's now talk about detection. When we talk about detection, the reason that we have to do this is because even though we may have the world's best protection, 58% of users actually have admitted to sending sensitive information to the wrong person. Those are the ones who have admitted it. 90% of the breaches, data leakages that you would look at in any organization can be traced back, in fact, to user behavior, either intentional or unintentional. And so probably there's a whole bunch of people that won't admit to it, and probably there's some that's intentional as well. But the thing that we have to do as we look at this is say, okay, first of all, yes, that's why we have to do detection. That's why we have to continue data protection even after we've locked down the identity and felt really good about who the user is accessing the data in the first place. We also have to think about how do we do this in a way that is moving from, I think, what I would call the thou shalt policies of the past, where we would say as IT organizations, you will use this device, it is owned by the company, these are the applications that are installed on it, this is how you'll get to the network, either VPN or whatever else, and this is what you're allowed to do once you get on. That sort of policy framework doesn't work in a world where you're letting people bring their own devices, where you're letting people put email on their own personal phone and so forth. And so we got to get to an access is allowed if type of policy. And so that's something that I think we're going to help you see how you can do that. The other thing we have to think about is there are different classes of users that you're thinking about when you do this type of stuff. When you put this protection in place, you have good corporate citizens like myself who always want to follow the rules, always want to do everything perfectly right. And if IT says that I should do it a certain way, I'll do it a certain way. You have other people who really just need to share the data. And so they might sometimes skirt the rules and say, well, yeah, I get it, why I'm supposed to do that. But this is really important. I have to get this contract signed, or I've got to get this partner engaged on this deal, or I've got to get this information to my external vendor who's going to help me with it. And so those people are going to say, for the most part, I'm going to try and follow the rules, but sometimes I have to go around. And then, of course, you have malicious intent, users who are actively trying to sabotage the organization or really want to steal data for some reason. And so you have to think about all three of those classes when you put protections in place. So let me demo a few of the things that we're doing for detection. Hopefully we'll see some things that hit each of those classes, and hopefully I won't forget to point them out as we go. So we're going to try and go back to the iPad here. And I'm going to show you mobile application management. I said earlier that a lot of times people don't want to manage the entire device. They want to let somebody bring their own device. They want to enable users to be happy, right? Be delighted with their user experience. And when you tell a user, I'm going to manage your device that you just bought and purchased with your own money and brought to me so that you could do work here, they kind of get a little skittish. They go, wait a minute, this thing is mine. I don't want IT to own everything that's on it. And they want to acknowledge the fact that they use this device for some personal things and they use this device for some work things. And so mobile application management allows you to do that. I'm going to show you how, if I look in this Word app, for example, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, these are some of the few apps, if you think about it, in the world that have that dual personality on devices. These are the apps that I would use for my own personal life. They're also apps that I would have to use for my corporate work. And so these are apps where we thought it was really important to do things like understand who the user is and where they were putting stuff when they take actions. So I'm going to open this corporate document. It came off of the SharePoint site. And so when I open that thing, which I could have sworn I previously downloaded, but so much for demo warm-ups. Now I've got this great corporate document that came from my corporate site. If I try to save this document out to a personal site, say, okay, I'm going to save a copy, because later on I might want to look at it and I won't have access to the SharePoint site or whatever the reason is. Okay, go ahead. I'm going to save it there. Oh, not allowed to do that, right? So we've put these protections in place. You can manage just this app rather than managing the entire device. You can say within applications, I'm going to say there are certain pieces of information that came from corporate sites. They should stay on corporate sites. Okay. Now, cancel that. What if I wanted to do something a little bit more sneaky and say, let's select everything, and I'm going to copy that. If I can't save this document to my own personal site, maybe I'll just send it to myself in an email. Go to my mail, start a message. Now I'm sending this message from my corporate account, right? So I'm allowed to do that, I think. We'll do Ryan at Microsoft, just to have an address to send to. And I can paste. Okay, that's cool. I'm doing that from my corporate account, and so there's some level of control there. Now, let's say that I wanted to do that from my personal account. And I say, switch over to my Outlook.com persona. Same sort of thing. When I go to paste here, paste is not an option that I have. So we're dividing the application again between the personal use and the corporate use, and we can say what you're allowed to do with corporate information within that application. So mobile application management, MAM. Now, let's look at my Windows PC again here. And I'm going to show you how that looks, or that similar concept looks in the world of Windows. So we have this thing that's pretty new called Azure Information Protection. Some of you who follow this space closely saw us acquire a company called Secure Islands about a year and a half ago, I think. One of the great things that Secure Islands technology has done as we've incorporated it into this thing that we call Azure Information Protection, is it addresses one of the big challenges we have around putting document RMS in place, putting rights management services in place on documents, which is getting users to classify stuff. Of course, you can't protect a document, you can't have a policy that protects a document if users won't tell you what belongs in that policy. And so one of the things that is now possible right here within Word is I can have this document, I've opened it up here, it's an internal document already. When I select confidential, first of all, I get a nice little bar up there that helps me remember to do that. And as soon as I do that, notice that it puts the watermark in place for me, so now it's a confidential document. I've got this footer in place now that reminds me what the sensitivity is as that document moves around. And as you can see here, it is protected by this RMS policy, so it's going to be encrypted. It'll be unavailable to anybody that happens to get access to it who doesn't have an ID, an authentication in my corporate environment. So I can do that. But that assumes that a user is pretty conscientious and remembers to select the right thing. We can also do this in an automatic way. So I'm going to show you this in Excel. Let's say I'm in here, I'm doing some work in this document, and I decide to put some credit card numbers in here. When I go to save, I'm going to get this warning. It says, whoa, hang on, you just got labeled confidential because you put credit card information in this document. Oh, all right. So now the user doesn't have to remember to do that. It just gets done based on some policies that IT sets. So you can have you could say, there are a bunch of code words that we use for internal secret projects. And every time you use one of those code words, I'm going to label the document confidential. You could do it on credit card information like this. You do it on a number of different things. But IT can set this policy that says automatically classify documents when I see certain types of information. Now, turns out this is actually my personal bank account log, and so I don't want it to be confidential and owned by the company. That's fine. I can say this is personal. And IT is going to say, well, you have to tell us what's going on here. You've just changed from confidential to not confidential. And so that's another policy you can set as IT. You could also just block that. You could say, no, you're not allowed to do this. But we're nice. We're going to say, OK, I'm just going to say the previous label no longer applies. And now it's personal again. And so I can go on and do my business. So again, user experience that an end user can love and live with. And an IT capability that is really powerful. The ability to automatically classify and protect data based on what type of data it is. The third thing that I want to show you here is Windows information protection. So this is also a new capability that we've put in place to help with this type of information sharing. Oh, I switched too early. Let's actually go back and talk more about Azure information protection. When you've done all of that, you've classified documents and you've got them protected, and so only the right people can see them, still they get sent around an email, right? And so if I send an email to somebody who should be able to see my confidential doc, they open it up, that's all great. They forget that it's confidential or they don't notice or something. And so they might try to send that email on. And so one of the things that we have with Azure Information Protection is this capability, which is to track a document. So I could say, look at this document, code blue, must be some kind of code name because it's got code in it, get it? 40 views, 9 people have been denied. Actually 9 times one user has been denied. This guy's pretty persistent. So I can see that type of information. I can look at that in a timeline. I can see when is that happening. And I can see where in the world is that happening. So this is pretty cool. Now I look at this, wow, this guy who's been denied, these orange bubbles are denied, is in Australia. Well, that seems weird. We don't have business in Australia. I don't know of anybody who's on the project who's supposed to work in Australia. So let's not do that. Let's revoke access. And so I could say, this document is no longer available to anybody. Everybody, it's just going to, it'll be encrypted and inaccessible to everybody who's got a copy of it. And that's a pretty great capability and be able to do that. So the last thing I'll show you there is if I were to now take Windows information protection and look at my SharePoint site. I have so many things open here. Okay, this is my SharePoint site. Here's the Contoso team site. Okay, you can see this little icon up here that you may not have ever seen before. This little briefcase up here says this website is managed by this organization. So this is a place where I've designated as owned by the company. And so documents that are here are owned by the company. When I go to download one of these documents, let's take the Northwind proposal draft, download a copy of that. Notice here in the file ownership column, it shows me in Windows, this is owned by the company. So Windows has this knowledge now of who owns this document. Even though it came off the site and now I have a local copy, Windows will say this is company document. So I'm going to protect it in different ways that I didn't normally protect it. Now if I open this thing, let's open this in Word Mobile for fun. If I open this in Word Mobile and say, okay, I'm going to copy some stuff out of this corporate document that's owned by my company, and I'm going to tweet about it. I'll tell you what's happening. Oh, hang on. Change this to personal. So now the user gets a warning generated by Windows that says, I know that document that's not yours. That's owned by the company. Are you really trying to put company information in this personal application? So this is all controlled by policy, by IT. And you could say, don't let them do it. Or you could say, just warn them like we're doing here and say, change it to personal. But you get the idea. I have the ability now to sort of persistently understand that document and the content of it is not owned by the individual. Now I'm going to switch tracks a little bit, and I'm going to talk about cloud applications. Remember I told you that if I asked every one of you in this room how many applications are in use, SaaS applications are in use by your users, you would probably underguess it by a factor of about 20. That's an average. That's a real number. That's research that we've done. 20 times is the number of SaaS applications compared to what people think is in use. And so one of the things that Cloud App Security can do, this is a relatively new product in the EMS suite, is show you what SaaS applications are in use in your organization. So the first thing you do is you do this discovery, and that's what we're looking at here, and it shows you all the applications that are in use. And for each one of them, we've done a bunch of work that you probably have teams focused on today. You can buy this product and stop them from doing that work. And that work is we do a score of the security of each one of these applications. So I'm looking at this application now, and I see the security and compliance sections here. I got a lot of NAs. They're kind of light in this area. And so now I have a pretty quick and easy way to understand, do I trust this application or not? It's in use by my users, but IT have not had a chance to evaluate the application and understand whether we trust it. Now I can see for this whether that's a trustworthy application. We've done this for 13,000 SaaS apps out there in the world, so you will not probably find any that are not already evaluated if you go run this tool in your organization today. So I can find out what it looks like. That's great. I can also do some investigation and say, let me look at the files that people are sharing with these SaaS applications. And I may want to look at all the files that are public, meaning that anybody that has a link, has the URL, could get access to this document. So these may be shared on different SaaS applications, but I have a bunch of files now shared by my users, and anybody that has the link could get access to this document. This doesn't seem like a good idea. Pre-release due diligence, publicly available. Let's look into that. I now can see what's the file path for this document. I can see what the URL is. I can understand, of course, who the user is, and I can do things like understand what policy is it violating. I have an Azure Information Protection Document Monitoring policy that I've established in this IT organization, and that's the policy that this one is violating. And this is the label that's applied to this thing, so it understands the label that we put on it. Remember earlier in Word when we were putting labels on things? It knows about those. All of this is information that's being shared through that intelligent security graph that I mentioned earlier. So as you're putting information, labels on things, that's going into the graph. As Cloud App Security is looking at those files later, it's pulling that information out of the graph and understanding in a richer context, is this stuff that needs to be protected or not? Is this stuff that I should be worried about? So this is some examples of how the graph helps these products work together, get better at security. Now, let's take a look at another thing I can do here in Cloud App Security, which is to understand what my policies look like. So if I want to understand what policies do I have in place, what can I do in a policy, right? Here's a policy that I may want to have in my organization about PCI compliance. And as I look into that policy, I can understand what the files are that are in that policy or violating that policy. Northwind customer data. That seems bad. I probably have customer data being shared out there. PCI compliance violation right there. And so if I say, oh, that's a bad thing, I can actually put that user in quarantine and say this user is no longer allowed to share data on this service. Or I can say this file actually needs to be private, and I can revoke those access rights. I can revoke that from public access the way that it is now. So I can do some great things in here from a setting policy perspective, from a using that policy to lock things down perspective, and from the perspective of purely just understanding what's going on in my organization. What is my risk level, right? I also can get these great, really granular alerts. And so as we look at these alerts, let's look at access control alerts. This is an interesting one just because of the type of thing that you can understand. This is the first time this app was accessed from Mexico. That could be valuable information to me. That might be a risky behavior that I want to look into and go find out what's going on with that user. And so again, lots of different information I can get here in terms of the cloud apps that my organization is using, even if they're not applications that IT sanctions. That's all a bunch of end user stuff, and we've talked a little bit about how that approaches or how that works on devices and those sorts of things. Let's talk a little bit more about your IT infrastructure, your systems, your operations in the cloud or in your own data centers. And for that, I'm going to go over here and look at our Azure dashboard for a product called Azure Security Center. So this product is one that I'm very excited about. It really puts to use the cloud in a way that's novel and new for security. As you deploy workloads in Azure, and this is something that is, let's say, a little bit more Wild West than it used to be for many organizations, because there's so much flexibility in Azure. I can spin up a virtual machine at the click of a button. I don't have to involve the infrastructure team every time I want to get a new server started, right? And so you have a lot of new stuff being deployed by a lot of different people. And the IT security organization in many ways has felt a little bit out of control and said, whoa, I don't even know what's out there anymore. So Azure Security Center is your way of seeing what all has your organization deployed in Azure, and what's the security health of it. So you're looking at this snapshot here, resource security health, that tells me for my virtual machines, for my networks that I've defined in Azure, for SQL databases, and for applications that I've deployed in Azure, what is the relative security health of all of them in aggregate? And of course, I could drill into each one of these and get more information about a specific one. My favorite way to do that, though, is by looking at recommendations. This is pretty cool. Even if I'm not a security expert, I'm just the owner of one of these resources in Azure, I could say, show me what I need to do better. How do I better protect this thing? And I'm going to show you this one just because it's fun. Add a vulnerability assessment solution. And so this thing is recommending to me, I need to add vulnerability assessment to these resources that I've deployed. And I'm going to do that on this VM here. At least I think I am. Oh, right, install. And we're showing you here not only things that you would get from Microsoft, but also from our partners. So we've integrated a bunch of partner solutions here from Qualys and from a bunch of others as well, from Fortinet and from Checkpoint and from Cisco and from F5 and any number of others. Different types of security solutions that we might recommend to you that you can deploy here in a couple of clicks. If I say I'm going to use Qualys, I already own some of that, I just click OK and I'm off to go. And so that's a really cool capability, the ability to do that right there within that dashboard. The other thing I want to show you that this does, though, is security alerts. Let's look at those. So as I'm running all of my servers and services and applications and databases in Azure, there's going to be all kinds of stuff going on, of course. They're always going to be under attack. Just because that's the nature of our world, right? And so security alerts allows me to see what is under attack, how is it being attacked, and what's my recommended course of action. And one of the things that I'm really excited about is we can correlate data across, of course, all the things that are happening in your own subscription in Azure, but also across all of the customers in Azure. So we start to understand a tremendous amount about what is the type of attack, what is the right course of action, and how do you remediate. And so we've started to now put these things into not just events, but security incidents that aggregate a number of events and understand what they mean. Look at this incident. I have a blocked SQL injection. Okay, so somebody tried to use SQL injection type of attack and it was blocked. That's cool. They tried an RDP brute force after that. That failed. That's cool. Good. All my protection is working. Uh-oh. Successful RDP brute force attack. This one, they figured out the right password in this instance. And now some suspicious processes are being executed on this virtual machine, and now multiple domain accounts are being queried. So they're starting to traverse laterally. They're starting to find other accounts that they can compromise. Oh, and now they seem to have done something where they're going back and communicating back to a command and control server probably. So now I can see all of this together in one incident. I'm not searching through a whole bunch of stuff to understand what's going on. And I can really quickly understand that there's a real attack here that I have to do something about, rather than trying to sift through a bunch of data to figure out what's actually important. And so this is Azure Security Center. That brings us through the whirlwind of detection, demos, the double D. Now, we can answer yes to these questions. Can you protect your data on devices, in the cloud, and in transit? Yes, we can do that. We can protect data when it's on my cloud services, when it's on my PC, when it's in transit, when other people are getting access to it. I can even see who's accessing it and who's being denied access to it. Can you quickly find and react to a breach? I think we just saw that with Azure Security Center most clearly. Now I can look at what's going on. I can quickly understand that a breach is happening. I can detect it and quickly get into what do I have to do about it. And do my users love their work experience? Yes, they do, because it's helping them to correctly classify data. It's letting them share information when they need to. It's letting them live as personal people as well as corporate people inside of applications. Here's the money slide. These are the things to go search for. If any of that looked interesting to you, look for information about these products. I spent all that time talking while you were taking pictures last time. I could have been drinking. Let me talk to you about a couple of companies that are using these capabilities. Excuse me. GM, some of you may be familiar with the General Motors company. They make the automobiles. About 200,000 employees, a massive organization. And they have these really sensitive RFP documents that they have to share with suppliers. They've got a big supply chain of external companies that give them all the components to put in the cars, right? And they're sharing these designs of new cars that haven't been revealed yet. They want to do that really securely. And so they're using some of these technologies, and it's a core part of how they protect their data. Avanade, big mobile organization. Like they're just the definition of a mobile workforce. All these consultants that go around to help companies like yours with deployments and other IT projects. And they have 28,000 workers. And they said, we're going to manage all of your devices. Sent out an email to everybody. Immediately, they saw a 30% drop in access to their Exchange servers. Exchange Online, actually. And they said, okay, maybe that's not a good idea. We want people to actually use email while they're traveling. We want them to be able to do their jobs while they're on customer sites. And so they went with mobile application management, the thing I showed you at the beginning of that section, where they say, inside the application, I'm going to manage what you're allowed to do, but I'm not going to take over control of your device completely. And so they're using that capability and many of the other EMS capabilities that it comes with. I want to read this quote from their leader, Joseph. He said, the best protection is protection that your users will actually use. Great protection that nobody uses is no protection. And I love that way of thinking about it because it really reflects the way we try to think about making it so that users love this stuff, so that they won't try to get around it and become shadow IT. The last one here is Star Companies. They're about 9,000 employees across 5 continents, so they're really spread out. They do travel insurance and assistance, and their CSO adopted Azure Security Center, that last piece that I showed you. Said, we're committed to the cloud because it allows us to be nimble and quick, but of course their organization saw some of those issues of being nimble and quick, like suddenly there's sprawl and they have all these resources. They don't know if they're adequately protected. But now he says, with Azure Security Center, we benefit from the vulnerability and threat management that Microsoft gleans from millions of Azure customers. And so they're seeing this benefit that we can deliver to them uniquely because we're looking across so many different customer deployments in Azure. Again, this is the intelligent security graph working for you 24/7. We're feeding all of this stuff into it, and our products are able to get better protection out of it. Now let's talk about response. I hope that when I say the word respond, at least, let's set a high bar. Let's say at least 30% of you in this room, when I said response, the first thing that you thought was assume breach. I hope. And if not, could 30% of you please just change your minds right now? And every time you think about response, think, I have to assume the breach, right? This is why response is important. James Comey famously said there are 2 kinds of big companies, those who've been hacked and those who don't know they've been hacked. And as you find yourself in one of those 2 buckets, response becomes important no matter which one you fall in. So this is something that we just know is a fact. We know that every organization is going to experience a breach at some point. It may not be tomorrow. It may have been yesterday. It may not be next week. It may be next month, next year, whatever. You have to assume that it's going to happen. Why? Well, we saw earlier that 58% of all users admit that they accidentally share information with the wrong people. But it also happens when they don't know what they're doing. When they are among the 12% of users who will click on a phishing email attack in the first 4 minutes after it arrives in their inbox. Think about that. 12% of your users, if you sent them a phishing email right now, would click on it almost immediately. And so even before an organization has a chance to get some new protection in place, if there's a new type of attack, for example, that gets past all of your traditional prevention technologies, and you haven't had a chance yet to roll out the patch or the new signature or whatever it is that protects against that thing, it only takes 4 minutes before an attacker gets access to 12% of the IDs in your organization. So, this is why you have to assume breach. Users will do the wrong thing, even if they're well-meaning users. So the Intelligent Security Graph is exactly why, this is why the Intelligent Security Graph exists. We want to be able to to be better at understanding what's going on across the world. When 12% of users in some other organization have clicked on a new phishing attack that's novel in the world, we want to make sure that we understand what that looks like so that when it reaches your organization, we already have protections in place. So I'm going to show you some technologies that help us do that and help you do that, both on the infrastructure side of things and on the endpoint side of things. Let's look at infrastructure first, just because I happen to have that browser open right now. Okay, I'm lying. It's because that's the order in which I've scripted the demo, okay? This is Operations Management Suite, OMS. OMS, we're in the security and audit section of OMS. This tool is tremendous. This kind of grows out in a way of the history of System Center. So any of those of you who have been using System Center and Operations Manager and things like that, think of OMS as the new wave of System Center in many ways. Cloud-based, very good at understanding what's going on your cloud resources, but also understands what's going on in your on-premises resources, in your data centers, and in AWS. I almost couldn't say it. AWS, the Amazon product. That thing, and in other environments as well. So combining all of your on-premises, all of your cloud resources, looking at all of that from a cloud-based console, that's OMS. So we're looking at that right now, again, in the security and audit section. And in this security and audit world, I can see some cool stuff, right? I can see notable issues, I can do detections, I can understand all of that kind of good stuff. That's pretty cool. And as I look into all of this stuff, I can see, oh, identity and access. That's pretty important stuff. I want to understand who's being rejected from trying to log into my sensitive servers and workloads and assets and things like that. I want to understand how I can better protect and where are the attacks coming from. I can get some information there. I also can do this really cool thing. As I look at threat intelligence, I can understand where those attacks are coming from. So you see incoming malicious traffic, that's down here at the bottom. It might be hard to read. That's the orange stuff. Red stuff is outgoing malicious traffic. So good news, we don't have any reds on the map right now. We do have some oranges. Let's look into those. And I can see from somewhere in Asia, I have a botnet trying to attack my infrastructure, my servers, right? Either deployed in Azure or AWS or on my own premises. And I can see what those look like. Okay, I'm going to drill into this specific event and see now it's correct. It's put together the query string for me. So now I'm way deep in the logs. I started out at this really high level of just visualizing the world, and you all probably thought, oh, that's just, you're never going to use that. That's eye candy stuff. But it's actually really something we think your Security Operations Center and your Operations Center staff more generally would use a lot. You'd come in here, you'd look at this, say, oh, I do have some threats. I have some people attacking me. Let's find out where they're coming from. Now I can immediately go straight down into the logs and understand everything I might want to know about that specific event. And so here I am responding really quickly, getting from, maybe days or weeks it might have taken me to put together the forensic trail to get to this in previous world. Now I'm going to do this in minutes, and I'm going to understand pretty quickly what's going on so that I can either shut down a port or take an asset offline or trace that back to a user or whatever, right? So I can respond pretty quickly. So that's Operations Management Suite. Now so that was infrastructure stuff. Now I'm going to flip over here and let's look at what this looks like from an endpoint perspective. And I am actually going to show you this from the administrative point of view in a second. But first, let me flip back, and we're going to do a quick little video tour of what the end user experiences in many attack scenarios, okay? And the reason I'm going to show you this is because I want you to understand just how little the end user sees. I said 12%. 12% of your users would click on a phishing attack in the first 4 minutes after it arrives in their inbox. Let's see what happens when they do. So, on the victim's machine on the left, I received this information in email, looks clean, I open the document. Now I might be scratching my head at this point to understand, like, what is this document really about? It's not what I expected it to be. But I'm still like, okay, I'll probably figure it out in a second here. Meanwhile, on the attacker's machine on the right-hand side, he's already gained access to my machine. He's got my credentials now, and now he's starting to operate Systebugger. He's got things that he's firing off on my machine. He's spinning up processes, and he's starting to gather intelligence off of my machine. And I didn't see anything on the left-hand side. I didn't see what was going on as the end user. And so it just takes one person, and you'll get more than one because it's 12%, remember. It takes one person to accidentally open something that seems innocuous in order for all of this to happen on the right-hand side here. So when this does happen, and your end user doesn't report it to IT because they don't know of anything happening, Windows Defender Advanced Threat Protection is going to help you deal with that from an IT perspective. So now we're flipped back here. We're going to look at the IT experience, okay? So let's pretend one of those users on your organization just got attacked in the way that you saw. And you're going to see in the Windows Defender Advanced Threat Protection dashboard here that you have a new high severity security alert as a result. When you click into that, you see it's a NeuroBlaze attack. What's a NeuroBlaze attack? Let me find out. I can get all kinds of information about NeuroBlaze from this and understand what the type of attack is, who these NeuroBlaze people are, why would they be attacking my organization, what's the profile of organization they like to go after, etc. Get some recommended actions, and I can even go down here and start to understand pretty clearly where this all happened from. I see that it's Liz Bean's machine, and I see when the attack happened, the following instances were spun up. We saw PowerShell, we saw Systebugger, remember in the little video there. And what happened from there, we spawned this executable file that then went out and reached into other machines and landed itself there under other names. So it's landed on Roger's machine as sl.exe, but it changed its name when it got to Grant Orth's machine and when it got to Lily Jarvis's machine. So this is a polymorphic transit across machines through the network. So that's interesting. Okay. Let's go further into Liz Bean's machine and understand what happened here. Let's look at Systebugger. Systebugger, what was it doing? Okay, here's a bunch of information, all kinds of grimy stuff I could get into here if I wanted to. I can go into this deep analysis summary and understand, oh, this actually has been submitted before. What's deep analysis, you might ask? Deep analysis is our detonation chamber, essentially. This is the same detonation chamber we use for Office 365 Advanced Threat Protection. Those of you who are using Office 365 and have the Advanced Threat Protection turned on will know that as email attachments come in, we separate them from the message. We put them in the detonation chamber to ensure that they're not going to do anything malicious. And then we reattach them and send the message on its way. We use that same detonation chamber here. So if you get a file that lands on an end user's PC, you can submit it to the detonation chamber and say, will you please detonate this thing and tell me what it's doing, like what's the deal? So this was already submitted a month ago. Now I can get all the information about what this attachment did or what this process did when it was run on Liz Bean's machine. Wow, tons of great information here, all within this one console. Now let me go back and look at Liz Bean's machine in a little bit more detail. Under alerts, I see a bunch of things happened. Okay, that's cool. Oh, that's bad stuff. Anomalous fire was registered to ASEP. Potential reverse shell detected. That's not good. PowerShell commands, not good, right? So all of this stuff indicates that there's probably a real attack happening on this machine. When I look down here in this timeline, I can start to understand when did this happen? How did it land here? How did this file get here, right? And so as I scroll down, and if I remember how to get to the right spot in my timeline, I'm going to see all of these informations about how this got here. And when I go through all of this stuff, one of the things that I'm not finding right now, but what I would find if I was a smart security person, is the link that says, here's where Outlook saved a file. Okay? So I would see that event in the timeline, and I could click on that event and say, show me more about that Outlook file attachment, the thing that came off of the email message. And that would take me into Office 365, and I would see, okay, great, this email attachment not only went to Liz Bean, but it went to 2 other people. We detected it as a threat on Liz Bean's machine, so we actually blocked it from those other users' inboxes. We reached into their inboxes and pulled it back out and said, that's a threat, let's get it out of there. Right, so it does that. That's all the intelligent security graph, powering all of that, making those products talk to each other, making them smarter based on the information that they're feeding into it. And I could go into advanced threat analytics and see more about the activity of Liz Bean, the user. We were looking at her machine before. Now I could look at her activity as a user in advanced threat analytics, and I see that she had that remote execution attempt. We saw that earlier. And after that, oh, look at that. She's doing some weird stuff. She logged into 5 computers that she doesn't normally log into. There's Roger's machine. We saw that earlier. And a few others. And so we now start to get a real picture of what that attack looked like, where it went after it landed, and where it came from. And I can respond very quickly with that information because I've built a whole forensic file now on this thing in 5 minutes that normally would have taken me, I swear, weeks to put together. Okay, so that's response in a nutshell. Now you can answer yes to, can you quickly find and react to a breach? And do you know who's accessing your data? Quick photo opportunity. This isn't as great a photo opportunity. It doesn't have product names. You're not going to have search terms out of that. So I just want to skip past this a little bit. We're out of time. And I'm going to take you to a plea. Not really a plea. It's more of a let's talk later. We have the Ask the Experts reception at the end of the night. I'll be there. So will a bunch of other experts. And I want to make sure that you know where it is and when. 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock, Hall D1. Come down, look for people that have this shirt on. This may be overselling it in my case, but there will be real experts down there. And we'd love to hear your questions, love to talk to you. Thanks.